Hey viewer, if you're running a hospitality business, you already know the work doesn't stop. And most of the time, it's not even the guests that wear you out. It's everything happening behind the scenes. That's why I'm really glad to introduce you to Lodgify. Lodgify is an all-in-one platform that helps short-term rental hosts and hospitality operators stay organized without needing a dozen different tools. You can manage reservations, keep your calendar synced, communicate with guests, and even collect payments all in one place. And if part of your goal this year is to drive more direct bookings, Lodgify also makes it easy to build your own website so guests can book directly with you. Plus, and I love this one, they include free onboarding, so you never have to figure out everything on your own. If you'd like to spend less time managing the chaos and more time focused on hospitality, try Lodgify with a 20% discount on all their yearly and bi-yearly plans with our code THM20, and that's THM20. Now, let's get started with the podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Hospitality Mentor Podcast. Today, listeners, I am very excited. I've got Adam Sperling, General Manager at the Charles Hotel, joining us today. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be with you.
Well, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and really just your current role and the hotel that you're in?
Yeah, terrific. Happy to do that, Steve. I'm currently and have been for just about the past year the general manager at the Charles Hotel in Cambridge. And the Charles is one of those uniquely, actually independent hotels that really gets to define its location. We're in that niche location of Harvard Square, and it's a real pleasure to sort of get to every day define what hospitality means in Harvard Square.
I love it. And listeners, if you're not driving, pause this, check out the Charles Hotel website because it really is special, beautiful place. I was just checking it out earlier today. And I wish I had known you earlier this year because I was in Boston. So next time I'm back, I'm definitely going to stop by.
You've got a new friend in Boston, Steve. Don't you worry about it.
I was walking the campus, you're like one of those smart guys.
Yeah, that's right.
There's beautiful. So I have to come by and see you now. But I want to get back to, the first question we ask everybody here, Adam.
Sure.
What was your very first job in hospitality?
My very first job was at the front desk as a front desk agent. And it really happened, which I think is probably true for a lot of people in this industry. It happened by accident. I didn't go, this was 39 years ago now. There were very few hospitality programs and hospitality degrees to be had then. I was going to school for something completely unrelated and honestly just needed to work to afford to finish school. And I knew someone that worked in a hotel who told me, hey, the front desk, it seems like everybody, is going to school and working part-time, and it's open nights and weekends. And I fell in love with it.
That's amazing. So when you were at DePaul, is that when you went?
I was at DePaul in Chicago and needed to sort of work and go to school at the same time to sort of support myself through that moment. And yeah, I think I don't think it was more than about 2 weeks into working behind the front desk that I said to myself, this is it. This is my calling. I just absolutely loved the concept of being of service to people.
That's amazing. So when you were going to school, you were not studying hospitality yourself?
I was not. I was studying political science.
I
don't know if I even really knew, Steve. I was figuring that out at that point, powering through like a lot of, early 20-year-old kids, especially at that time. And I didn't really know I was studying political science, and, the hospitality bug hit. And then it became clear sort of pretty quickly that, I had an aptitude for this. And a year later, I was an assistant front desk manager, and it quickly became clear that, I could build a career in this environment.
Amazing. And so what was the hotel that you started in? What was the name of that one?
So the first hotel was the Knickerbocker Hotel in Chicago. And at that time, today, I believe it's part of the Millennium family of hotels, but then it was owned by a local Chicago family. I'm born and raised in Chicago. I've been in the Boston area for 30 years, but Chicago was where I started. And it was an independent hotel. And I was at the desk, and I spent a couple of years at the front desk, and then wanted to try housekeeping. I thought that was a great way to learn to be a manager, to manage a larger staff and a staff that was very different to motivate. And I did that. And then from there, I joined a hotel, which for many decades was iconic in Chicago, called the Omni Ambassador East, part of the same Omni chain that exists today, right? But this was one of their original sort of old school classic hotels as they were growing the brand, 35 years ago. And that was an incredible experience working there.
So kind of give us the journey there. You mentioned you get the Omni. Omni's a great brand. Like when I work our way up to where you become, your rooms division manager, the Colony. So kind of run us to what do you get to there?
I will, sure. So spent about 5 years at the Omni Ambassador East, really learning the finer points there of service and attention to detail. I worked for a gentleman who to this day remains my mentor in the business. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Spent a year at what was it was called Guest Quarters. Steve, if you remember that brand in the early 90s, there was a Guest Quarters hotel and there were DoubleTree hotels. They were essentially identical concepts. But Guest Quarters bought DoubleTree, but took the DoubleTree name because there were more DoubleTrees than Guest Quarters. And I've got an interesting story to share with you about my time there. And then my mentor from the Ambassador East moved to Boston and called for me to join him.
That's amazing. So let's go back to that. So DoubleTree is very different than Omni, right? So
right.
How was that transition? 'Cause Omni, upper scale, luxury hotel.
Yeah. And that was
DoubleTree. What was that kind of transition like?
So I did that quite honestly because I'd had a couple years in the front office, and then I went to housekeeping for a year at the Knickerbocker, and then 5 years in housekeeping at the Ambassador East, right? So I really felt that I needed to get back to the front office. I had only been a front desk agent and an assistant front desk manager, but not in charge of the department. And I thought, before I try to go and be a rooms director someplace, I should pop back to the front desk and lead that department. So the opportunity arose at that Guest Quarters, then turned out to be DoubleTree. And I did that for a year until my mentor came calling to be a director of rooms at the Colonnade in Boston.
Very nice. So the DoubleTree, that was one of my first jobs in Tallahassee of all places. They DoubleTree, and I ate a lot of cookies there from the DoubleTree.
Yeah. I have a story about the cookie to share with you.
Tell me. Yeah.
So it's a fun story, right? So really the only thing that changed at the hotel when it went from Guest Quarters to DoubleTree was we got the cookie, right? Otherwise it was an identical sort of proposition there. So everyone was excited, right? These fresh baked cookies would come down from the kitchen at 1:00 in the afternoon, and the PBX operators would bag them, and we'd start giving them away to arrivals. And I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, the general manager came down and he just asked me, he said, "Hey, how are the cookies going?" And I didn't think about it. I just said, "You know what? The first hour or two, when these cookies are warm, the response is off the charts, right? You hand somebody this warm cookie. It's an incredible moment." I said, if I'm being honest, 4 hours later, when you hand them the cookie, it's not a negative situation, but it just doesn't, there's a clear difference between handing somebody the warm cookie, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said to him, what we should do is put a bread warmer under the front desk so that the cookie would always be warm. And I didn't think anything of it, but he submitted the idea to DoubleTree. And about a month later, I got a letter and I think a check for $150 at times. My idea was like the bright idea of the quarter. Today, it's the standard in DoubleTree that there's a bread warmer under the front desk so that they pass out a warm cookie.
It's so good.
And the reason I love the story is not to say that, oh, I thought of that, but what I took from that was the general manager recognized an idea and did something about it. And I've always kept that in mind. My job as the manager is not to have every good idea, but to recognize a good idea and execute on it.
I love that. That's a good one of the quotes today. We're clipping this one, Adam.
Right. So
amazing.
that's
That's
my
where it comes
DoubleTree
from.
warm cookie story, and it's a fun one, but it really stuck with me because it is really and truly my role every day to recognize a good idea when I hear it and execute on it.
It is really a special thing. Like it sounds corny, but like I was at a conference it's an okay conference. It's a DoubleTree in Orlando. You know, the hotel is not the best, but I checked in and I
Yeah.
got that warm cookie and
Right.
one of the best welcome receptions
Right.
in any brand.
It's pretty tough to beat when someone hands you a warm.
Yeah, like we think about it in luxury hotels all the time. Like, what's the welcome amenity going to be?
Right.
Reception. There's like, house prosecco and things like that.
Right.
Warm cookies still like,
There's not a lot of
warm.
negative response to a warm chocolate dip cookie.
Yeah, it's really good. So I love that. And I laugh because it's still such a good thing. And I'm glad now, Adam, I get to hear the history behind it that we hear on the podcast.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So you joined your mentor. What's your mentor's name? Let's give him or her a shout.
Yeah. So David Colella, who's he's been the general manager for over 30, but probably 32, 33 years now at the Colonnade in Boston. He's a Boston native who worked his way around the country a bit with Omni hotels, and he actually got me into the business. And he actually got me the job at the Knickerbocker Hotel.
Wow.
And then ultimately hired me himself. But he is a mentor in the truest sense, and not only because of what he hired me to do in a couple of different hotels and taught me, but he taught me to network myself and to be visible in the community and really how to treat people, and more than the X's and O's of how to execute in hospitality. That's really what it means to be a general manager, is the culture that you create.
Oh, and it's true. I know you see it. And I want to talk about the cultures you created as leaders. So as you're working your way up here now
Yeah.
with them, you get to the Colonnade, you're there as a rooms division manager, 5 years. What is that
Yeah.
like when you're working with them?
Yeah, so that was just a terrific experience because he really allowed me to be exposed and participate in any part of the hotel that I wanted to. Back in the day, if you might remember, Steve, there used to be a lot of hotels that had like a manager on duty program, right? Where you'd move in on Friday and you stay till Sunday.
Yep.
And at that time I was young and single, and not only did I say yes every time, but I probably swapped with, half the managers who wanted to get out of it. And I wanted, it was an excuse to me to be in the restaurant or the lounge or in other areas of the hotel that I would typically, throw myself into as a rooms guy coming up. He would ask me, did I want to sit in on PR meetings? And I would just say yes, just to be a fly on the wall and understand those things. So I think, when you're building your career, say yes to anybody that will allow you to be the fly on the wall for anything, right? It's incredible what you can learn sometimes sitting in a room with some smart marketing people and just being allowed to be part of the process in a very small way.
I think I agree with you on that. And do you see that now with some of the younger generation coming up? Are you forcing them to kind of be in these meetings?
Well,
Or feel like a lot we're trying to get out of it?
Yeah, I try to do that just because I know the benefit, right? Like, don't tell me that, because you're the front desk manager, you can't have anything to do with marketing or food and beverage. Like, if you want to, lead a hotel someday, you need to understand how all those things work. No one's going to be an expert in multiple areas of a hotel, right? You have to pick one area that you're an expert in, but a good understanding of how it all comes together and a respectful understanding of what it takes to work in the areas that you're not an expert in is really valuable.
That's true. And so they sound like you were allowed to do that, especially being that manager on duty. You got to be the boss of every department on those weekends.
It was great. Yeah. And it was a chance to run food and bus tables and do whatever, just help with the banquet team or whatever was happening over that weekend. So incredible experience. It wasn't part of my week in, week out routine or responsibility.
And so did you start making a name for yourself there? Because it is one thing, like when you start seeing the saying, oh, Adam's manager on duty again, like people start seeing you as that leader. Do you think that was really a differentiator?
Completely. Yeah. I think people start to realize that, you're developing the skills to be able to step up in any given situation, right? And that's really, the general manager needs to, I mean, I've always viewed myself as the guy that needs to give the illusion, if it's not real, the illusion, if nothing else, that I am really in control and calm and comfortable with whatever situation is going on around me. And I've been able to do that in my career. And I can give you an example or two of that. And I think it comes from those experiences, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm the manager on duty. The restaurant's in chaos tonight. And I had to just figure out a way to get through it, right? Or something happened with the banquet and the numbers went haywire or whatever it was. And okay, so you're in there and you're talking to the client and you power your way through it and you start to learn like, hey, there's nothing that we can't overcome here. Or we just take a deep breath and let's come up with a solution on the fly and make it happen.
I love it. So you were making it happen there for 5 years, and then you get
Yeah.
an opportunity, it looks like, to become a general manager for the first time.
I did, this
What's that like?
So the gentleman I mentioned, David Kalali, when he brought me to Boston, he told me, I'll never forget it. He said, come to the Colonnade. We're going to work really hard. We'll have some fun too. And when the time's right, I'm going to help you become a first-time general manager. And 5 years later, the time was right, and he did, put his name out there to help me to get my first GM's job, and that was great. It was a very mid-tier hotel. I had a lot of people from the industry that knew me that used to say, like, you're kind of too good for this place, right? I'm like, you know what, though? I appreciate that compliment, but I'm learning now to be the person responsible for the entire operation, right? And it was great to have to do a marketing plan and a food and beverage inventory and all of those things, really in a hands-on way. So
What was that like, that first kind of day that you're a general manager? Because I'm sure you were thinking about that moment. Do you still look
yeah,
like you sit down in the chair the first day, you're like, man, what am I doing here? You're like, all right, I'm ready.
I felt ready. I tell you, here's another little sort of piece of advice I would give people growing their career. I did every job a little bit too long before I took the next step, right? And I did that because I gained confidence from being a little too ready versus not ready enough. I never wanted to put myself in a position where I had bit off more than I could chew.
Mhm.
So, did I need to go back to work another year in the front office before I was rooms guy? Probably not, right? But I just wanted a little more front office. And did I need to stay 5 years in housekeeping at the Omni Ambassador East? Probably 3 or 2.5 would have been enough. But as I was building, I wanted those building blocks to be so secure and so solid, right? That they would hold up every step of the way. And I felt that same thing. I was at the Colonnade 5 years as director of rooms. Probably could have been gone after 2.5 onto, a different hotel or a first time GM role. So when I hit that first GM role, I was ready. I felt like, now would I have been ready if it was a 300 room Park Hyatt as a first time guy? Maybe not. That's
Right.
why I felt like that was a really good, I had every box to check, but I had it, in a 130 room or whatever it was, mid-tier hotel. So I thought that was a really good first step.
Yeah, so you get that first step, you're at the Days Hotel.
Yeah.
When do you start to look at the next step, right? So
So,
you
so,
filter the next
so,
place.
so that was one where I thought, okay, it's a first step. It's clearly not where my end goal is, right?
Right.
And one thing I realized when I was there is I really loved that independent hotel. I had it at the Colonnade. And even though the Ambassador East, Omni Ambassador East was part of a brand, it was really kind of a unicorn. And most people in the market actually knew it as the Ambassador East. It had been there for, 80 years. And it had only been Omni for 10, right? So even though it was part of Omni and that was great, I really wanted the independent nature. And I, in my networking, and this is another sidebar I'll give you here, Steve. When I moved to Boston, the first week, David Kalal said to me, you're going to join the hotel association and you're going to get on a committee and you're going to start to meet people that don't work at the Colonnade Hotel, but work in this industry. And we went to every event together and I got on the membership committee and I met people, and one of the people I met was this woman who, her and her sisters owned this little hotel called the Hotel Tria in Cambridge, right? So, she called and knew I had sort of been David Colell's number two guy for all those years and remembered me from the hotel association. And she was trying to create a hotel. I would describe it at that time as sort of like a poor man's Kimpton, if you remember back in the day, right? Maybe what today might be like a joie de vivre kind of hotel. So kind of kitschy, lifestyle-y, but before that was really a thing. And I had the best experience taking what had been like a Best Western hotel and turning it into this kind of really interesting, creative, fun hotel called the Hotel Tria. We found a local woman who made handmade soaps. And when you checked in, their shampoo and conditioner was in your room, but you picked your own scent of soap, which we cut for you and gave you.
Cool.
So really an opportunity to do a lot of fun and interesting things. And I loved it. I really loved that independent spirit that you could have, and that you could be creative, and that you had to always challenge yourself to keep being creative. And that really also stuck with me, through the years, that you just, in the independent environment, there's no resting on your laurels, right? There's no playbook from the corporate office for delivering what what the brand, if you will, in quotations, proposition is. You have to define it. It's incredibly invigorating and challenging, right? Because the heat is on, you get that work year after year to stay current and figure out what's next. And, people are coming for their points. So you need to constantly up your game. But if that sort of lights your fire, then the independent hotel world is an incredible place to practice hospitality.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a resurgence now. Like I just came from the Independent Lodging Congress where these independent hotels and the big brands are starting to look at them. So I want to talk about that maybe towards the end here.
Okay.
I would like to learn more about your point of view on it. So you're there for 4 years, creating this amazing environment.
I am.
Leading the chart. How do you make a change from there?
And so interestingly, one thing that happened at the end there was that the hotel was sold, right? The sisters had owned it and had me help them reposition it. And then they sold it, right? It's great for them. Well, one of the owner was the same person that owns the Charles Hotel and still does to this day. The general manager of the Charles Hotel at that time was someone who I worked with his wife in Chicago and had met him and stayed friendly with him. So then he was my boss for the last 9 months I was there. So, it's one of those, if you don't know already, this is a small industry. You don't burn any bridges, right? And, there's, that whole 6 degrees of separation concept. There's like only 2 degrees, I think, of separation in the hotel business. So that was great. But I wanted to get back into a more luxury environment. And there was a hotel that, well, today it's called the AKA in the Back Bay. It was Lowe's for a while. But before that, at this time, it was called Jury's. It was an Irish chain. And it's a great hotel. Again, even though it was an Irish chain, it really was perceived as an independent hotel. And the general manager was someone I knew from my hotel association time. Now being a GM, I was now on the board and very active. And he was looking for an assistant general manager, a hotel manager. And I called him up and said, hey, I know I'm a GM now, but, I want to be the GM of a luxury independent hotel. So can I talk to you about being the director of operations or the assistant GM of that hotel? And it was a great match. Now he said to me, listen, I'm from Ireland. The company sent me here to open the hotel, but my plan is to go back. Right. So you would be in line to take over, which I thought this is the dream scenario, right? This is what I've been working towards. I've got 2 stints as a GM, and now I'm going to be sort of the GM in waiting at this 4-diamond independent hotel in the Back Bay in Boston. Right. So a year in, he gives his notice and he tells me it's game on. The vice president of the company is going to come next week and talk to you. And then his wife changes her mind and says, I don't want to move back to Ireland. will you take back your notice? And so he does.
And my wife happy. Yeah.
Talk about the highs and lows, right? I went home and told my wife, like, this is it. This is the big break. And 48 hours later, I said, actually, never mind. There's no break. Wait. Um, but, uh, but this gentleman said to me, listen, I feel really bad. Like, that this wasn't like my intention. So if anything ever comes up, I will support you, in the GM's job. And I thought, okay, that's super. So 4 months later, I find that a hotel that I had always admired and aspired since it was being built, the Hotel Commonwealth, was looking for a general manager. Um, and I went to him and said, oh, will you sort of speak on my behalf? And he went and had breakfast with the asset manager and told him that
Wow.
he would be making a big mistake not to put me in the position. And I was there almost 17 years.
That's amazing. So
Right. So
it's a beautiful hotel as well as Commonwealth. I was looking at that from
yeah,
before. But
yeah,
I have a question going back. So 'cause
yeah,
I've talked to a couple of general managers that are looking for new roles and they're stuck in like kind of these mid-level hotel roles. But I'm not mentioning their names, but there's, I think part of it's ego. I don't want to take a half step back or a step back. How did you do that? Was that talking to your friends and family and mentors? Like, how did you make that decision?
Well, I mean, it was strategic. I mean, when early in my career, when I said to myself, I think I could ultimately become a general manager, right? You know, it was, it was these, it was these mentorship talks with David Kalala where I said, okay, so this is what I want to do and how do I do it? And we really talked about how to build that methodical career. And some of it was staying in roles a little bit too long, which gave me the confidence to succeed as I grew. And some of it was checking my own ego as I grew. And I knew that the Days Hotel and the Hotel Tria were steps along the way, right? I had a plan and, I was strategic to not stay so long that I was pigeonholed into being the guy that ran a little 70-room boutique hotel, right? Which is why I took that title step back to get myself in the luxury 4 diamond independent world. And I knew that, I thought when I did it, it was going to lead to be the GM of that hotel. As it turned out, it led to the Hotel Commonwealth. But I think if you just don't try to get hung up as you're building your career on what the title is and all of that, but just be strategic on what fits you the best. Don't pay attention to the other noise. Know yourself and have a plan and stay with it and be ready to pivot when things, present themselves. But if you get hung up on that, and to this day, as you probably know from talking to a lot of my counterparts out there, a lot of my counterparts are managing directors and vice presidents and managing directors and grand poobahs of whatever.
Yeah.
I'm the general manager of the Charles Hotel. And that was the job that was offered to me. That's the job for 30 plus years I aspired to get. I don't need to be the senior VP of anything. Everybody knows that if you're the general manager of the hotel, you are the business and cultural leader of that operation. And not being hung up on some of that comes from my history of building my career where I wasn't hung up on that, And I'll tell you another sidebar that's happened to me actually a couple of times where people that reported to me were making more money than me. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So when I got to the Colonnade Hotel all those years ago, the executive housekeeper had been there a long time. The previous GM had elevated her salary beyond what probably was necessary.
Afraid to lose that person.
Afraid to lose that person. And David Cole got there and said, listen, it is what it is. It's no reflection. She knows she's maxed out. And I didn't care. It was like, it's fine. So she was making $4,000 more than me at the time. She was going to be a career executive housekeeper, and I was going to be a general manager of a hotel. So I just, he was worried that I would be offended by that. I said, like, I got a job to do. I don't really care what other people are making. And the same thing actually happened to me at the Hotel Commonwealth. I got there as GM, and they had a director of finance that when they opened the hotel, they had, brought it in at a very elevated salary, and and I said, it's okay. Don't, it's, no.
Put them money, yeah, as long as they
Correct.
put them money.
I knew I took the job at an entry level luxury GM salary, and I more than leapfrogged him over the time, obviously.
So hopefully in the 17 years, yeah.
Yeah. And he only was there for a couple of years with me, but so to not focus on things like that, right? Not focus on the title, not focus on what you get paid compared to other people. If you don't focus on those things, then I think you keep your eye on building the right experiences. You can grow your career in a much more meaningful way.
That's amazing. So, you're at this is something of an anomaly these days. You're at this hotel for 17 years.
Right.
Get in there, we're not going to cover all 17 years, but you've done so much. It's a 4-diamond hotel.
Yep.
I'm more curious is how do you keep yourself motivated year after year? I'm sure you were getting recruited. You had people wanting you to go places and do things. How did you stay for all that time?
Yeah. So for one, in that independent hotel environment, it forces some of that, right? Because there's no brand ethos. You have to keep reinventing it. And to me, that was very invigorating. Also, about, about 7 or 8 years in, the hotel expanded. They built another 100 rooms and tripled the meeting space. So I almost really got the next job without having to leave. When I arrived, it was a 149 room hotel with 4,000 square feet of meeting space, and it became a 245 room hotel with 12,000 square feet of meeting space.
Nice, yeah.
Right. So that was helpful, if I'm being honest. If that had never happened, it's more likely that, 10 years ago, I would have seeked the next step. But in that case, I got the next step, which is not the usual scenario, right? I might have been there 7 or 8 or 9 years, not 16 and a half years.
And as you're there, do you start working more and more with ownership, with who you were with the asset manager? You start really developing yourself.
Yeah. So one thing that was so great about that hotel is that it was sold 3 times while I was there. Wow. So I was able to work with 4 different ownership groups, 4 different types of owners. When I got there and was hired, it was owned by and operated independently by Boston University. So I reported basically to the asset manager at the university, who was a tremendous guy to partner with. It was sold, and then Sage Hospitality out of Denver, you probably know Sage, and a private equity firm bought it really with the expressed interest in expanding it, building that expansion, and selling it, which they did. So that was an incredible process to be part of this $55 million renovation and work with this New York private equity firm. They sold it to a REIT. So now I've got a publicly traded owner who has a different strategy for the hotel, right? Because they have dividends to pay, and it's less about flow through and more about just pure revenue dollars. And nobody was worried about whether the flow through was 50% or 20%. Like they needed revenue dollars to pay dividend. And then back to a private equity firm during COVID. So those experiences were very helpful in forcing me to think like an owner and understanding that, in all cases, those owners had different investment strategies. In my job, there's no one way to be a successful hotel, right? There's no one magic strategy that fits everybody. And even in that one hotel, we operated a couple of different strategies. One year I ran a 92% occupancy annualized. And then coming out of COVID, we were down in the, high 70s, low 80s, but we had put $60 in rate on the hotel, right? So,
You're making the same money, less people in there.
Well, yeah, and both strategies are good. Now the REIT that had to pay dividends wanted the 92%. We would have conversations saying, "Hey, do I make money on the $90 hot wire room in February?" And I say, "Well, you might make about $7." And they said, "Okay, we want the $7." Right. Where the REIT was like, "I don't want anybody paying $95 in my hotel."
Right.
So you really learn that there isn't one way, and you have to be able to be flexible and execute to that owner's strategy.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you got to stay through all those different owners.
I did.
Something rare as well, because a lot of
It
those,
is.
you're like, no, I want someone I know. Get the dinner.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And I always operated, if I've got a philosophy or two, one core one, Steve, is that I try to make every decision, whether it's with a client or an employee or whatever it is, like I'm going to have to live with the consequences, right? Versus sometimes in these brand environments, the person knows they're gone in 18 to 36 months,
Yep.
right? So if there's a consequence, they don't really have to live with it, right? But I always felt like I was probably going to be here forever. It didn't turn out to be the case. It turned out to be 16.5 years. But every decision I made, I felt like, okay, I'm gonna have to live with the negatives, and so I better be okay with living with whatever the downside is, and I'm gonna try to make a really great decision, knowing that there'll be positives and negatives, but I have to be here for the negatives. So how we treated clients, we really had great relationships with the university, be it Boston University, and with the Red Sox. We became the official hotel of the Red Sox, being right in Kenmore Square, and we would take their reservation at their discounted rate when I probably some days could have sold the room for another $100 to anybody off the street. But I just felt like, the long-term meaningful partnerships with people in your backyard were really important, and how you treated employees, just paid big dividends. And I felt like all the employees were watching every decision I was making about their colleague, right? So make the right decision, do the right thing, not most of the time, but every time. And at the end, you win.
I love that. And so you leave your imprint on that hotel, you work with all these different owners, and then you
Right.
make a change this year.
Yeah.
You had a
So-
change that you made, or were you forced to change as a new owner? How does that out?
So this is a situation where, had you asked me, a year and a half ago, I would have told you it's highly likely I'll work another 12 or 14 years at Hotel Commonwealth and I'll retire. That's it. I mean, I literally poured my heart and soul into the Hotel Commonwealth. But the gentleman who I had worked with his wife in Chicago, and then I knew that was here for all those years, that he was my boss for a while. He called me one day and said, "Hey, old friend, we should have lunch." I said, "Okay, lunch." And he said, "It's my time to step away, and I want you to meet the partners, the owners of the Charles Hotel." And the Charles Hotel has partners. One of the owners is the gentleman that actually built it 40 years ago. And he actually still comes to work every day. He's in his mid-80s. He's an incredible developer, iconic developer in this market. Dick Friedman, I don't know if you know who Dick Friedman is. He built the Liberty here. He built the Logan Hilton. He built the new Four Seasons One Dalton. He's a legendary guy. And so there's that involvement. And then there was the fact that, in meeting the partners, they said that basically the hotel's never for sale. Right? It's not a hotel.
Feeling.
Yeah. Right. So that's where you say to yourself, okay, I'm not looking for a job. I loved Hotel Commonwealth, but at some point in your career, right, you're worried these hotels, they do trade, right? They do get sold. That's real. And at some point, someone could come in and just say, you know what? Hey, time for a fresh voice. That's no fault of my own. But if you can take that off the table at this point in my career, right, 39 years in, that's a big deal, right? To know that, listen, I only have job security if I continue to perform and deliver for my owners, but at least I don't have to worry about, well, it's going to be sold every 3 years and who knows what's going to happen. And the Charles is a special place. It's right in Harvard Square. It's independent. It's a really special property. So
That's amazing.
So then when you don't think you are looking for a change or even need a change, right? And maybe more importantly, if you had asked me, 16 and a half years in, did I need a change at Hotel Commonwealth? I would have said, Steve, absolutely not. I'm invigorated. I still have ideas. But when you actually have a change and a different canvas to be creative from, it took me about, a month here to say to myself, like, wow, like, didn't know I needed it, but so invigorating, so incredible at this point in my career to suddenly have this new canvas to create on.
I love it. So let's talk about the Charles Hotel now. You're there, you're leading the charge here, another
Right.
hotel.
Yep.
I'm asking for your 5-year plan, but what are you most excited about in the next 12 months at the hotel?
Yeah. So the hotel ha- came out of COVID's flow, right? Every hotel was impacted, obviously, in 2020, right? There's no doubt about that. Um, and then it really came out slow. And then, and not to dive into the political world, but even before the current situation, Harvard itself has been in the crosshairs, and that's the overwhelming demand generator for this hotel, obviously. So really, there's an opportunity to sort of almost reintroduce is not the right word, but re-energize and reimagine what the Charles Hotel can and should be going forward. And that's just incredibly exciting to try to say, okay, going into 2026, how do we redefine this 40-year-old iconic hotel? What's the next decade going to look and feel like? And that's the process we're going through now, looking at our brand pillars and trying to express them in today's terms, so that we can start to really, you know, execute the next iteration of this iconic independent hotel.
Yeah, and just going online and seeing the website and the social media, I could see what you're trying to push out, a very lifestyle driven, artistic,
Yeah.
I like seeing all the art in the different rooms. Everything's very
Yeah.
unique and one
Yeah.
off. I like what's going on there so far.
Yeah.
And so, talking about independent, I want to ask you this because I was just having this conversation with others. There's a big debate now. Like there's so many soft brands coming out from,
Right.
the Marriotts and the Hilton and the Hyatts and all these,
Right.
and for listeners, you can listen to the other podcast we do on Skift called Good Morning Hospitality. We talked about that last week. Is that's happening, right?
Yeah.
But then I really believe after seeing, I'm building my own independent hotel down here in Miami now, and I see what you all are doing. You've had a whole career in this space,
Yeah.
basically. Why do you think that the independent hotel way is the best way to go, in your opinion?
Yeah. So obviously, like it needs to be the right hotel in the right location, right? You can't, a purely independent hotel in suburban Cleveland probably not going to be super successful, right? So you start out with where are you, right? And what kind of hotel are you? It doesn't have to be 5-star luxury, but where's the hotel, right? And if you look at the last two hotels for me, the Hotel Commonwealth in Kenmore Square, a niche location in Boston, right? People think of Boston, they think of the Back Bay or now the Seaport, right? These are the
Hilarious,
the
yeah.
the the well-known areas. Kenmore Square, kind of a niche area, but there is Fenway Park in the Red Sox. There is Boston University there, and we were sort of the king of that niche location. And then you're able to, in a very organic way, tell the story of that neighborhood. And when you can do that, there's no soft brand, trying to force a story that can compete with that. Right. So we wove the fabric of Kenmore Square. I'll give you an example. When the hotel was built, it was sort of four dilapidated buildings at the time that they tore down. One of them had held an iconic live music venue called the Ratskeller, like a punk club that many, in fact, the Police, the band, the Police, that was their first North American show. Was at the Ratskeller. So I got to know, and then the Ratskeller had closed, and a few years later, the building was torn down, and up came Hotel Commonwealth. So I met the gentleman who was the owner of the Ratskeller, got to meet him and talk to him, and he helped me create this crazy, amazing suite that was an homage to the Ratskeller. And we sourced artifacts we found on eBay, some things that he was wondering like where they went the last night that the place closed, that people had ripped things off the wall. And we created this really unique, special suite. And then he contacted some bands that had played, and we turned that suite as an opening thing into a recording studio. And these 5 or 6 bands each recorded a couple songs, and we made a CD live from the Ratskeller suite at Hotel Commonwealth.
That's cool.
We either gave it away, or the few we sold, we gave to an artist charity, that helped artists that were trying to get sober. But that's authentic. You can't, there's nobody in some, brand office someplace creating a story that can compete with things like that. I created a baseball suite to pay homage to the game of baseball, being the official hotel of the Red Sox, and with all kinds of special memorabilia that the Red Sox provided me. So you can be very reflective of where you are in that true independent environment, right? And that's really the trick and the genius and the magic of it, is that it's not a really cool idea. I remember, I won't say who it is, but one of the owners along the way said, well, this Rathskeller suite and this baseball suite are amazing. We got to do more. I said, well, you need something that makes sense. And he was like, people love Elvis. How about the blue suede suite? It's like, okay, well,
What's the tie-in? Really?
Elvis and Kenmore Square, right?
Wow.
It's not about a kitschy suite. It's about, is it really authentic to that location,
Yeah.
right? And so here,
the Goodwill Hunting Square, or the Goodwill Hunting Room.
yeah, you need something that has a tie-in to Harvard Square, and the process we're going through now is sort of, what is Harvard Square over time? What are the things that make it iconic? How do I take things like, the Hasty Pudding as an example? That's, the iconic Harvard theatrical club that does the Man of the Year and the Woman of the Year. And we're partnering with them now to maybe do something fun in the hotel that supports Hasty Pudding and supports the arts and theater, and is also really unique and special that you can't get anywhere else. So we'll do some of those things here, and then, it's really, you're so blessed in these niche environments where outside my door is Harvard and Harvard Square.
Amazing.
All I really have to do is find a way to hold the door open and let that energy and specialness come in.
And some of those secret societies to be doing their meetings and
right. And how do you sort of make that in some, authentic way kind of part of the experience?
I like it. You got me excited now.
Right. So that's why the independent hotel environment has always helped me stay focused and current and creative, because there's no like, we're all set, we figured out the magic, we're done. It's like, okay, now what? Okay, now what? You have to always ask yourself, so now what?
I love that. I love that very much. Well, Adam, I got one last question for you.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot of things here. I know how busy you are, but I got one last one. Is if you could go back to young Adam,
Yep.
working at the Knickerbocker at the front desk,
Yeah.
whisper some advice into his ear, what would you tell him?
Okay. So, one is, be patient when you're building your career. I mean, I've had people over the years tell me that I want to be a general manager in 5 years. It's like, okay, no. So be patient. And, as a leader, I learned that the most important thing you can do is make sure everybody believes that their role is mission critical to the hotel, right? So as you're growing your career, just know that every job you have is really, really critical to the equation. The magic happens when it's like a symphony. Every instrument matters. And if you pull one out, it doesn't sound the same. So if you take that approach as you build your career and realize whether you're checking somebody in or checking their bag or cleaning up or bussing the table, like, all of it really matters, right? And don't let the title or the how much the carpet in the lobby costs dissuade you from realizing that piece of the puzzle is really important. And if you act like that while you're building your career, you'll be able to execute on that as a leader.
I think that's great advice and a great place to end this conversation. Adam, I appreciate you joining us very much. And listeners and viewers, if you haven't yet, make sure to check out the Charles Hotel online now. Make sure to follow them on social media. And if you're going to Boston, look, what more fun place to go? You got Adam, who just told us about all the cool things he's going to be doing. Make sure to stay at the Charles Hotel with him. Adam, I'm very grateful you spent this hour with me. Thank you very much.
Great to talk to you, Steve.